All right. Hey everybody, Tori Townley here on the Serve Brew. Hope you got your coffee ready. I am so honored and excited to introduce the coolest people ever that I've heard brilliant things about. He loves people in very unique ways and is like my dad calls him the Billy Graham of Native America. So I'm so excited to have Pastor Dobie Weasel on today's Serve Brew. Hey, Pastor Dobie.
How you doing, Tori?
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I'm pumped to be doing this call. I got to meet your son, Pastor John, at the Dream Conference a few months back, and we were just talking about stuff, and he mentioned how incredible the ministry you're doing is, and just really love your family. My whole family loves your family, all that good stuff.
Yeah, likewise.
Getting to hear some of the vision and the beautiful work that you're doing really inspired me, and I was like, I really want to pursue possibly having this conversation with Pastor Dobie and just hearing loving people, just getting your wisdom. So really excited to have you today. If you would, Pastor Dobie, just take some time to maybe give us a little bit about who you are, because some people maybe don't know your story and your testimony, just kind of what you're all about. So take a few minutes and tell us about you. Okay.
All right. Well, as you said, my name's Dobie Weasel. I'm Native American. I am a Assiniboine. A lot of people have never heard of the tribe, the Assiniboine. So normally what I say is I am a Sioux, because the Assiniboine are Nakota, whereas the Sioux in South Dakota and North Dakota, they are Lakota. So it's just a little bit of a different dialect, but we speak the same language. We were part of the original nation of tribes. The Sioux had a confederation of probably seven or eight tribes that were part of the Sioux Nation, and we were a part in the original, but then we broke off and we went into Canada, and so you'll have Assiniboines or Nakota people in Canada, in Saskatchewan, and then you'll have Nakota people in north central Montana, which is where I'm from, a little tiny reservation called Fort Belknap. And I was born on the reservation. Mom was an alcoholic. She had 9 children by 7 different guys. I mean, it was just crazy. And so she gave away a lot of her children. She gave me to an aunt who took me off the reservation and raised me in Billings, between Billings and Great Falls. And very dysfunctional situation. She was an alcoholic as well. And I started drinking when I was like 5 years old. First time I got just really wasted, I was 5. Started drinking fairly regularly because there were parties at the house all the time. When I was about 9 or 10, long story short, quit school in the 7th grade, started doing drugs when I was 12, went back to the reservation when I was 17 to sell weed. I got a kilo of weed, went back to the reservation to sell weed, and wound up running right into Jesus. And there was a major revival on my reservation when I went back, and all the young people were either dying in car wrecks or they were getting saved. And fortunately, I got saved. And went to Bible college about a month after I got saved, and was there for 4 years, went to New Mexico, pastored for 8 years, traveled for 10 years as an evangelist. And then 19 years ago, went to Omaha, Nebraska to pastor a church, and pastored that church for 8 years, got back on the road as an evangelist for a couple of years. Then I planted a church with my son, John. It's been 9 years ago this fall. And so just turned that over to him and his wife, Angel, 6 months ago. And so because I feel that God's call upon my life is to reach the 4 million Native people in North America, less than 3% are born again. So there's this huge mission field in our backyard, and very few people are really focusing on that mission field. And I just tell my pastor buddies, I say, you know what, man, we need to stop flying over mission fields to get to mission fields. And so that's, kind of what we're doing. And so we feel that our mandate is to reach every Native home in North America with the gospel of Jesus Christ through the 7 mountains of culture. Like I said, I traveled for 10 years as an itinerant minister. And when I started, there were 2.5 million Native people in North America. Uh, Less than 3% were born again. At the end of 10 years of traveling like super hard, because I spoke at every youth camp, every church revival, every family camp, any place I would open up the doors, I would go and I would preach. Did that solid for 10 years and probably traveled on average 40 to 45 weeks out of the year. So I was on the road all the time. I was doing everything I knew to do to see Native people saved. And at the end of 10 years of hard travel, I contacted the U.S. Center for World Missions in Pasadena, California, and they said, Dobie, nothing has changed. I mean, still less than 3% of Native people are born again. And so that's when we went to Omaha 19 years ago and pastored the churches, planted a church, and just sovereignly, God began to give me supernatural dreams. He gave my wife a dream, gave me a couple of dreams, and I'm not a dreamer, you know. I believe in prophetic dreams. You know, God says that, last days He'll pour out His Spirit. Old men shall dream dreams. I guess that's why now I'm dreaming dreams, because now I'm older. But old men shall dream dreams and young men shall have visions. And so God began to give me these supernatural dreams. And so we just knew God was moving us back into Native ministry. But that said, I just, as I realized God was moving us back into Native ministry full time, I just began to pray and say, God, show me what I've never done, because you've heard the old adage of, if we continue to do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always had. And so I want to get what I've never had. I want to get that 97% of Native people. And so just begin to pray and say, God, show me what I've never done. And so God led me to a story about a guy named Bill Bright, which you may have heard of his name. He started a ministry called Campus Crusade for Christ way back in the day. And a guy by the name of Lauren Cunningham, who started a ministry called Youth with a Mission. You probably heard of them. And then a guy by the name of Francis Schaeffer, who started a ministry called the Brave Fellowship. Well, back in 1975, which was way before you were born, they got together, and I think they were either having breakfast or having lunch. But anyway, they got together to talk about world missions and how do we reach the nations. And I think it was Bill Bright who began to share how that God had given him a strategy to reach the nations through 7 mountains of culture. And Lauren Cunningham pulls out a piece of paper and he slides across the table. He said, "You talking about these 7 mountains?" And God had given them both the same strategy, separate and apart from one another. And so I came across that story, and I just really felt that God had led me to this strategy, which now is called Marketplace Ministries. It's kind of evolved and morphed into what people know now as Marketplace Ministries. But it's basically getting, it's not that God isn't going to use the church, because, God uses the church. That's his bride. That's his primary vehicle to reach the world, obviously. But I realized that for the 10 years as I traveled, I was primarily seeking to reach the nations, the Native nations, through this one sphere of influence, the church. And so now we're developing strategies to reach Native people through arts and entertainment, through business, through the family. We've actually partnered with Focus on the Family to develop some Native parenting curriculum that would help Native parents and Native families. We're developing a Native children's book in which we're going to market that to Native third graders throughout North America. And it's a children's book that'll help them. It's not a quote unquote religious children's book. It's a children's book that will help them dream again, because of the 2.5 million Native people, of which less than 5%, and I believe less than 3% are born again. Many of them struggle with alcoholism. drug addiction, sexual abuse, physical abuse. The need among Native people is astronomical. I mean, it's like a third world country out in the middle of nowhere. Oftentimes, like if you understand the history of the U.S. government and the policies that the U.S. government had toward Native people, in the beginning, when the Pilgrims came and all of that stuff, it was they are our allies. And, we need Native people to survive. And so they're our allies, they're our friends. Well, as more and more European people came, the Native people just started to be pushed westward. And so that caused problems. And then they became enemies, and then they, the U.S. government wanted to relocate them to Oklahoma, and so forcibly removed so many Native people from their historical homelands. And so you have the Trail of Tears, in which so many of the Cherokee people died along the way, and just the history. And so what happened was when some of our reservations were established, the U.S. government was literally at war with Native people, and so they, once they conquered them, they would put them on these reservations, which literally were prisoner of war camps, and so Native people are out in some of these reservations are out in the middle of nowhere because they didn't want them close to the rest of the population because, these were our enemies. And so, like if you go out to Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Pine Ridge, part of that reservation is on what they call the Badlands. And the Badlands are called Badlands because nothing grows there. I mean, there's just, you can't grow a stalk of corn out there. Just the land is so bad. And so Native people have been, relegated, some of them, to like the worst parcels of property in America. Some of them, were a little different. Some of the Native tribes were peaceful and they did what the U.S. government asked them to do. And so they were treated better and given better parcels of ground. And so some of them can make use of their ground. Some of them can't. What that lends to is it lends to poverty because there are no jobs. When you have no purpose in life, it lends itself to depression, to anger, to alcohol, to drug addiction, which when people get in that state of mind, they do things that they normally wouldn't do, like abuse one another. Husbands abuse wives. Sexual abuse is rampant. And and I know that hurt people. And so when you grow up and you're hurt, and that's all you know, and then you get alcohol and you begin to hurt others. And I hate to make it sound so bad, but it is. It really is. And so here are these people who have been stripped of, for the most part, stripped of everything, and part of which is their identity, because part of at one time, the U.S. government's policy toward Native people was assimilation. We can't exterminate them, so let's assimilate them. We can't get rid of them, so let's teach them, let's incorporate them into the larger whole. And so what they did is they worked with the church. They worked with major denominations of the day: Presbyterians, Methodists, Episcopalians, Catholics, and they established these Indian schools all over the nation. They're called boarding schools, Indian boarding schools. And so the U.S. government worked in conjunction with the church, and they came into Native homes and forcibly removed the children so that they could take them to the boarding schools. And the saying was, we want to kill the Indian, but save the man, which basically meant let's get rid of their identity, strip them of their culture. Let's cut their hair, put them in, Western clothing, forbid them to speak their language, and let's rid them of their culture so that they can be good Christian people. And I think that might have been a good idea, maybe, but it didn't work. And now today, Native people kind of look at the church and they go, what do I want to do with that? Because, they took me out of my home, took me away from my parents, stripped me of my culture. They worked for the government to steal my land. So Native people, many of them have a problem with the church. I say it like this. They don't have a problem with Jesus, but they have a problem with the church. And so when we come to them as the church and we say, you need Jesus, they say basically, you know what? No, I don't. I've got my own way and I've got my own religion. Because as Native people sought to regain their identity about 30 years ago, there was a revival of Native religion. And now you can go out on, for instance, the Pine Ridge Reservation. I was out there last week and interviewed a guy. And the guy said, as a young man back in the 70s, he said there might have been one Sundance, which a Sundance is a Native ceremony in which they literally worship the sun. And he said, back when I was a kid, there might have been one Sundance on our reservation per year. He said, now we have over 50 Sundances on our reservation per year. So there's been this huge revival of Native religion. The Native people have run headlong back into culture and their tradition because they were hurt by the church. They're really seeking to regain their identity, and unless we find our identity in God, who made us, we're gonna. I tell Native people that God created you with a purpose. He created us all with a purpose. Revelation 4:11 says that for by Him and for Him we are and were created, and for His good pleasure. And so, just like He created a bird to fly, and He created a fish to swim, He created you and I to serve Him, to know Him, to love Him, and be loved by Him. And until we find that purpose, we're going to be like a bird in the sea or like a fish in the tree. We're just going to be out of sorts. It's not going to work because we're not fulfilling our purpose. And so Native people are still seeking to regain their identity, but they're looking for it in the historical trappings of what was yesterday, and so it's really stymied Native people, and it stunted them in many ways, and so there's such a great need. I hate to paint such a bleak picture, but for the most part, it is. And unless we have a major revival among Native people, I don't know, alcoholism, suicide, homicide, cirrhosis of the liver, which is a disease associated with alcoholism. Those are the four major causes of death among Native people are suicide, homicide, cirrhosis of the liver, and car accidents. And most of those are associated with alcoholism. So anyway, I hate to, again, so maybe you better ask me a different question.
No, Pastor Dobie, wow, this is enlightening me so much, because I have friends who maybe have Native American in them, but it's not, I've never seen such a deep connection. And thank you for sharing. I was just gonna, I was hoping that you would tell the pain that people go through, because a lot of people don't know what it's like. So thank you for going, you said it's hard, but we need to hear what people are going through. We have to listen to it. My next question was gonna be, so for people maybe like me, I'm not in that circle, I don't have it in my blood, but I have now, because you shine the light on it, I have a new awakened compassion. How can I make a difference? How can I, like, on behalf of everyone in my circle that's ever hurt your people, like, I'm
Right.
sorry, on behalf of that, I say sorry. Like, we want to honor you guys and treasure you and celebrate. Like, that's my heart. So just, I think sometimes, like you said, a lot of times we fly over the mission field right there trying to get to the other one. And it's easy to be oblivious and just not aware of what's going on. So, like, you're raising awareness right now in my own heart and whoever views this. But what are some practical ways that we can be better at supporting this, even if we're not in it every single day? What's the best approach?
Well, I think Native people, the Native church. I mean, again, we're seeking to reach Native people through all of these different spheres of influence. You know, we want to create Native films, redemptive Native films, take some of the Native the historical stories, such as the Trail of Tears, and we want to turn, eventually, hopefully, we can put in film that story, yet from a redemptive place, with a redemptive twist to it. We're in the process right now of writing a book based on the Trail of Tears that would have a Christian family who is, you know, caught up in that whole thing, moved forcibly from North Carolina to Oklahoma, lose family members along the way, only to have to wrestle with the issue of forgiveness. You know, whether or not they ever get land back, whether or not anybody's sorry for it, whether, you know, that's beside the point. The issue is, if we don't forgive, you know, I mean, it's like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die, kind of thing. And so Native people, we need to forgive. We need to, for our own sakes, if for no other reason, and for the fact that God tells us to do it. And so, yet so many Native people still hold anger and bitterness, and because, you know, I mean, you look around you and you realize, man, at one time this was all ours, kind of thing. And it's like, now we don't have anything. And so that, you know, the issue of forgiveness is something that I think Native people as a whole, that we need to address within our own selves. But I would say that, as far to answer your question, what can you do? I think there are three things Native people need. The first one is intense, prolonged intercession. I just think Native people, Native land needs prayer. We're working right now with a group, with a ministry called Every Home for Christ. And Every Home for Christ, they are a ministry that wants to reach every home in America with the gospel. And so we are partnering with them to reach every Native home in North America with the gospel. But one of the linchpins, one of the key strategies of Every Home for Christ and of Life Tribe is to raise up awareness of the need, and that's why you doing what you're doing, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. But one of the things we're doing is we're developing a prayer map, in which, you know, we can get that out to people like yourself, and then you can distribute it to your friends and your family members so that they have a prayer guide, because so many people, they have no idea what the need is and how to pray for Native people. And so what we're going to do is we're going to develop this prayer guide. In fact, we partnered with Every Home for Christ, and we are in the process of writing the prayer guide now, and they have committed to printing 50,000 copies of the prayer guide, and so we can get that out to a lot of people. And so we're going to do that, and we want to raise up intercessors. The second thing I think that Native people need is Native people need healing. And we have a two-day seminar that we've been doing for years at our church, and we call it All Access. We brought Native pastors to our seminar. They've gone through it. They found healing and release from mother wounds, father wounds, soul ties, you know, just all of those inner healing kind of things. And so we're seeking to multiply that out and take that healing seminar regionally, and so that's another thing, another way that Native people can be healed. I don't know. Again, I know you're asking for you. How do I help? Pray. Uh, Obvious. When people ask me, how can I help you? Here's what I say. Number one, pray. Number two, obviously give. You can, and if we're gonna do what we want to do, which is create Native films and raise up Native entrepreneurs and write Native children's material and on and on and on. It's going to take finances to do that. I mean, it just does. And so if people want to get on, our website, lifetribe.tv, and just donate, 10, 15, 20, 50, whatever it is they can. Every little bit helps. So that's part of it. I mean, the ministry needs finances always. So number one, pray. Number two, give. And then number three, probably even more importantly, and I tell people this all the time, who do you know that I need to talk to? And I think the connection part for me is huge. I'm a connector. I just love to connect people. And so, I think your dad's kind of like that too. And so that's one of my when I did the Strength Finders test, that was like my third strength was connector. And so I love to connect people. And people that I don't, and your dad knows people that I don't. And I could never sit down with them, but you could, and your friends can, or whoever, say, hey, I know this guy you need to talk to. And I think that's huge. So, those are the things: pray, give, and then who do you know that I need to talk to?
Beautiful. That's
huge.
Concise. That's easy too. Very good points. I got them all written down. Very practical, and it's something feasible. I can be part of what you're doing. I may not be the one who's out there and visiting people, because that would be fun too, but it's something I can do every single day to support. Oh, what you gonna say?
But I was gonna say the other thing though is I hope to once we get, because this ministry, although I've been around for 1,000 years, this ministry is only 6 months old. So we're still getting our legs under us. And once we get it up and running, and I get some administrative help and all of that, we want to begin to take missions teams to the reservations. So don't totally rule out the idea of going, because I'd love to see you go and come with us to Pine Ridge or to one of these reservations that just so desperately need Jesus. So,
man, that's exciting. I'm so glad you said that. I got it on my dream board now. No, I love just hearing the big dreams that you have. Like you said, you're not a big dreamer, but God's giving you all of this stuff. The picture that you're painting is so beautiful. I'm in it. You're writing a kid's book and you're doing movies, and it permeates every area of life. And I think it's so cool that you said the church is beautiful, but the church has to be in all the realms of life that people are in. So the arts and the entertainment. There's Pastor Jonathan Wiggins in Colorado. Was really big on that. They're huge into the arts and environment and things that people care about. That's how you get into people's lives. So I love it.
Definitely.
And it makes so much sense. It's so beautiful. I think that you probably have covered a lot of this, but I was gonna just ask, tell us what Life Tribe is all about. It's your ministry. I think you've definitely covered a ton of what you're doing, but if you just want to give a quick vision of what that looks like, great.
Yeah. Well, Life Tribe, again, is our vision is to reach every Native home in North America with the gospel, utilizing the 7 mountains of culture. And so, that's our strategy. We're going to utilize arts and entertainment, which is, it's film, fashion, sports, music, and dance. And so, we're connecting with different people. One of the things we're looking at doing is developing a website. And on our website, we want to have videos. We want to have stories, video testimonies, video blog, written both video and written. But we want to provide a forum where people can come and they can hear positive Native stories. Stories of Native actors, stories of Native musicians and dancers and business people. And like, for instance, I've got a friend of mine that hopefully I'm going to be able to interview in the next day or two. He grew up on and off the reservation, went to Harvard, got a business degree, came back, started a business, and his business now has 30 businesses underneath his umbrella. And last year they brought in, I want to say, $400 million. And he's a Native guy and just doing a great job in business. And I look at this guy. So there's one illustration. Then there's another example of another guy, Native guy that I know in Iowa, who started his own auto body shop. And so, went to prison, got out of prison, got out and just said, what do I do? And so started working in an auto body shop, learned how to do it, started his own business. Now what he wants to do is bring kids off the reservation, teach them how to do auto body so that they can go back to the res and start their own business. And, just stories like that, guys that are doing some really cool things. And so I want to get their stories, put them on a website, and then have, whether it's business or whether it's family or government. I'm meeting with a Nebraska senator. His name's Tom Brewer. He's a Sioux from Nebraska. He's a Sioux, and he's a senator. And so I want to interview him. So, and I don't believe he's a Christian. Maybe he is, but I don't know him. So I couldn't speak to that. But it doesn't matter. Here's a Native guy who is serving in a capacity that few Native people serve in. So my thought is, man, let's get his story. How did that happen? And how, I'm just going to ask him that. How does a Native person get to be a senator? And tell me your story, kind of like you're doing with me. And so we want to put this all on a website so that when Native people come, they can hear positive stories. And then, we're also going to put as part of this website, there's arts and entertainment, business, family, government, media, et cetera, but there's also that spiritual part of it. And then so we're going to get some of these guys. For instance, I'll just throw this out there. I was speaking on an Apache reservation probably 2 months ago. So I speak at my friend's church. We go to lunch at his house, and he has these two little girls that are just so cute. It's just crazy. These girls are just beautiful. One's like 11, the other one's 9. And so we walk into his house, and there's this punching bag and there's this punching dummy. And so I'm thinking, this guy must be into martial arts or something like that. And so we sit down, we're having lunch, and he introduces me to his daughters, and he says, my girls are into karate. And I said, really? He said, these bags and this dummy, that's not mine. He said, it's my girls. And so he showed me a video, and this little, I think she's 11 and his other daughter's like 9. These girls are legit. I mean, they are karate champions. They're national champions. He took me into their room. Their rooms are filled with trophies, and they've got newspaper articles on their wall. And so what I want to do is I want to get back there, interview him, and so tell their story just from a secular perspective. Here are these Native kids that are national karate champions. And so how does that work? What's that look like in your house? And then, at the end of that, say, if you want to hear more of their story, go to the spiritual page. So they go to the spiritual page, and their dad says, hey, 25 years ago, I was a raging alcoholic. Jesus changed my life. Because Jesus changed my life, he changed their lives. And so preaching the gospel, but not preaching the gospel, having a hook over here. And they don't have to, they don't have to go to that page, and they don't even have to listen to that if they don't want. But I want to provide so many positive stories that Native people want to come back again and again and again just to hear about, what are these guys doing? That's what we're doing with the children's book. The children's book that we're creating for the third graders, they're stories of what I call positive stories that help the kids begin to dream again, because so many Native kids, they're not aspiring to great things. They don't dream of being astronauts or president or, I mean, if they have a dream, it might be that they can be a basketball player one day, because that's huge in Native country. But other than that, I don't know that Native kids are dreaming to be doctors and lawyers and things like that. So we've written this book. It's being illustrated now, of stories of what I call not so famous Indians. A lot of people they've heard of Geronimo and Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse and all of those old chiefs, but nobody's ever heard of a guy named John Harrington, or a guy named Charles Curtis, or a girl by the name of Ronaldo Vicente, or who else? A guy named Joe Hip. Joe Hip was a Blackfoot Indian from Browning, Montana, who at one time was the heavyweight boxing champion of the world. So, that's a great story. Kids need to know that, hey, there was a Native American heavyweight champion of the world. Or John Harrington. John Harrington was a Chickasaw Indian. He's now a retired NASA astronaut, and he took the Chickasaw flag up into space 7 different times. Or Charles Curtis. Charles Curtis, when I tell people, do you know that at one time there was a Native American vice president of the United States? They kind of look at me like you're looking at me, and yet Charles Curtis was a Kaw Indian from Kansas who, it's a long time ago, 1929 to 1933, he served with President Herbert Hoover as his vice president. And so, I'm going to share this with the kids so that they can see that, there was a vice president, there was an astronaut there, and Native people have done some really cool stuff. And, and so we end every one of those stories with, just a little tag of, way to go, Mr. Curtis. Thank you for representing Native people well and being the first Native American vice president of the United States. And then we say to the kids, and who knows, maybe you can serve as the first Native American president of the United States. And just kind of help them, feed a dream, create a dream, maybe, and just help them aspire to great things. And so that's what we're doing with that. And with the website.
What?
Yeah.
What did you say? Say that again.
Oh, that's what we're doing with the book, and that's what we're doing with the website as well. Just trying to inspire Native people to greatness. To man, it's time to get up and do something positive with your life.
So brilliant. Oh my gosh. I'm like on the edge of my seat. Just everything that you're saying. It's so inspiring. Dreaming is contagious. So I'm just sitting here thinking, dreaming is one of my big things. I work at a dream center. I help plant dream centers. And I'm just like, if I didn't have that in my life, what would it be like? And it would feel very hopeless.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact that you're helping revive that, especially in the children, is so beautiful. I was thinking, and forgive me if this is a funny parallel, but I was thinking about how the movie Black Panther just came out. And all of these African American children are talking about how they've never seen a hero that looks like them. And how crazy is that? Like, they've never seen a hero that looks like them, and now it's like inspiring and encouraging. And I'm just thinking, the same thing that you're saying is the children need to see heroes that look like them. There's a book I've been reading by Pastor Bill Johnson at Bethel, and he's talking about how miracles and prophecy go together. But if you speak out of a miracle that's happened in your life or a testimony, it enables that in the spiritual realm for someone else. So similar type testimonies can open up someone else like, oh my goodness, I could have that miracle. It opens up faith in the same way. So it's so cool that you're spotlighting these stories so people can be encouraged and say, hey, I have something familiar that I can put myself in, that my seed of faith is going to be planted in the mountains. So Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm so in it, and I'm coming on a mission trip, and I hope everyone else does that watches this. So, Pastor Dobie, you're my hero, man.
Oh,
Um,
well,
okay. You're the
thank you.
best. So, okay, is there any, let's see, we talked about your specific, some of the specific stuff that you're doing. I love the stories thing. For people who really find themselves um, having a passion for this, what is like some wisdom, maybe even if it's not necessarily the same people group that you're called to, but they feel God calling them to be a voice for the voiceless and to step up for those who are marginalized? What's some wisdom in pursuing what God has for you in that? What would you tell people as some of the most important ways to follow God's will in helping others?
Well, yeah, I would. That's a great question, and I would just say stay close. Stay close to His heart and listen to His voice, and trust Him, and understand that um, when God gives you a vision, it may not happen by Tuesday. You know, I think a lot of people they catch a vision, they catch a burden, they want to do something, but they either they want to do it right now, which there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, I say it like this. I say sometimes when people come to the altar and God gives them a word, they think it's going to happen by Tuesday. But it very often doesn't. And in fact, when you take a look at vision, there are three phases to every vision. There's the birth of a vision, the death of that vision, and then the supernatural fulfillment of that vision. For instance, Abraham knew that God was going to give him a son. From the time that Abraham was given the promise of a son till the time that Isaac came was 25 years. And so he went through the death of that vision, and then finally God gave him the supernatural fulfillment of Isaac. And the danger is that between the birth of a vision and the supernatural fulfillment, the danger is thinking that God needs our help to fulfill that which He has promised us. And so what did He do? He went into Hagar, he committed an Ishmael. And so, whether it's Abraham or whether it's Moses, who knew that God had raised him up as the deliverer of Israel from Egypt. And the reason we know that he knew was because when he slew the Egyptian and buried him in the sand, the Bible says that he supposed his brothers would have understood. Would have understood what? That he was the deliverer. And so what happened was, from the birth of that vision till the time it was fulfilled was 40 years. And so he went through that death of a vision, and then finally he's seen the burning bush, and it was time, and God supernaturally fulfilled that which He had spoken to him 40 years earlier about. And so, you could talk about anybody, whether it was, Abraham or Moses or Joseph. There's a prime example. Guy he had the dream. Sheaves are bowing, stars are bowing. He goes and tells his brothers. And I would say to anybody in that case, be careful who you share your dream with, because not everybody's going to buy into your vision or buy into your dream or support it. But from the time he received it to the time it was fulfilled was 13 years. And he went from the promise to the pit, to the prison, and finally to the palace. And then I would say, again, with Joseph, with Abraham, with Moses, with David, with Paul, any of those guys, the vision and the dream was never about them. It was always about other people. And it's never about us. I think Rick Warren put it best when he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, and he started off with those 4 words: it's not about you. And so when God called you, it's never about you. It's always about others. So
Great, great wisdom. I'm taking notes. My notebook is full. It's good. Like, I never even thought about dreams that way, how they have to die. Oh, good, Pastor Dobie. And in my generation, it's very hard. Quick. It's hard. You wake up and you come up with a new dream because that one didn't work out, but it did, because if God called you to.
well,
real.
God gave me the dream of reaching every Native home in North America 30, almost 35 years ago.
Wow.
You know, as a young Bible college student, probably somewhere around your age, a guy came to my school. He spoke. His name was Dick Eastman, and he spoke about going into the nations and reaching every home in that nation. And when he said that, God just placed this dream in my heart of reaching every Native home in North America. And that was 30 some odd years ago. And so I hope this is the time of supernatural fulfillment, because I don't have a whole lot of time left to do this. Only 20 or 30 years, right? I'm 57, so I'm believing there's a Caleb anointing on me, and I'm going to be here till I'm 85, still taking mountains.
Go for 100, man. Why are you
Oh,
so
come on.
85? Come on.
Right.
Awesome. Oh, goodness. So, okay, I got another question. What if people want to get involved with Life Tribe and what you're doing, whether it's giving, getting the prayer map, checking out online, what's the best way for them to either get in touch with you or your team, or just check out resources online?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch is to go to our website, lifetribe.tv, and we should come up, and it should be pretty self-explanatory after that. Just contact us, and we'll get a hold of you. See what you can do to help.
You on Instagram, Pastor Dobie?
I'm not. See, that's the old school in me. I need to get with it.
All right, Pastor John can help set you up. We're going to talk to him about that.
There you go.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. Like I know you were on the road. You texted me yesterday and today all over, and you're at a Starbucks. Like, I just thank you so much for interrupting your day.
Thank you.
Is it okay if we pray real quick?
Please.
Okay, awesome. Father God, I thank you so much, Jesus, for Pastor Dobie and for his wonderful family. I thank you for the story you are writing with his life, God. From the time he was a little kid up until now, God, I thank you that the dream is just continuing to be expanded, God, and he's helping others dream, God, find their ability to see you, Lord. I pray you anoint what he's doing, anoint his team, and just keep his eye on you, like he said, Lord, keep him close to you, Jesus, and just bless the vision that you've given him. I pray for the people of Native America, all of that beautiful humanity, God, that the world has overlooked, that we as a country have often overlooked, God. We repent for that, Jesus, and I pray that this is a time of revival where people are treasured and valued and dignified like never before, and that people are raised up, God, to make a difference. God, people that we look up to, that we respect, Father. I just want opportunities as brothers and sisters to celebrate and just continue to keep Pastor Dobie and his family with us. We love you, praise you, and thank you in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Have safe travels, and hopefully we'll cross paths soon. Mission
I hope so. You tell your dad I said hi.
Yes, sir. I sure will. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.